Hello and welcome to the Old Testament 12-step recovery video series, which is the continuation of the For I Will Be With You podcast. And this is the 53rd episode. The first 52 episodes were actually recorded some time ago. It was a weekly series of comments on the Old Testament and 12-step recovery that went through the entire Old Testament from start to finish. So now we're embarking on the next phase of this series. And what I want to do is do one step at a time of the 12 steps, starting with some verses from Genesis and continuing through Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. So this could take some time, and I don't know, might take a whole year to go through the 12 steps in this way. So these are going to be shorter videos, probably 3 to 5 minutes each. So this week we're starting with first step Genesis. I also just want to make a note. This week saw the death of Matthew Perry, who was obviously a very famous actor and somebody who made a point of sharing his story with the public, that he was a person with a serious addiction problem that looks like contributed to his death, prematurely at the age of 54. I think he was fairly open about that, and I think that if you enjoyed his performances on television, I think you can understand the message that he has for us, which is that addiction can happen to anybody. You can be rich like he is, and it doesn't matter. In fact, maybe being wealthy even made things worse for him. And he wanted to be remembered as someone who helped other addicts in their time of need. So that's something to think about as we go through our personal journeys in recovery. I'm going to start today's video with Genesis 12:1, which is a very famous verse in the Bible. And it goes like this. It says, "And the Lord said to Abram, go forth from your land and from your birthplace and from your father's house to the land that I will show you." So what's happening here is that Abram, who his later name is changed to Abraham, you might know him as Abraham. Abraham is the first monotheist in the history of the world. Abraham grew up in a city called Ur, which was in Mesopotamia, sort of where Iraq is today. He grew up in a civilization that was full of idol worship. His father had a shop where he sold idols, stone sculptures of gods of the city of Ur and that civilization. But Abram, early in his life, even when he was a little boy, began to hear a message from God that there was only one God in the world, that these idols were not real gods, that there was only one true God in the world. And so as Abram grew up, he began to realize that he was different. He told people that there was only one God in the world, one true God. And God eventually told him that it was time to leave. Time to take a step away from Ur, away from his birthplace and from his father's house, to a different place. And so Abraham sets off on a journey, and the land that I will show you, that God is going to show you, is the land of Israel. And if you look on the map, it's pretty far. If you're going on foot, it's about 800 miles or so from where the city of Ur is thought to have been, and the land of Israel. But it doesn't matter to Abram. He's ready to go. So now let's look for a second at the first step of AA, and we'll come back to Genesis 12:1. The first step, as you probably know, is we admitted we were powerless over alcohol, that our lives had become unmanageable. And what's interesting about the first step, which is arguably the most important step, because if you don't take the first step, you're not going to take the second step, and so forth. And it can be some of the hardest work you'll ever do, but there really isn't a lot to it. You don't have to write any lists. You don't have to talk to anybody except maybe your sponsor. You have to change your mind about what's happening in your life. You have to admit something. What does it mean to admit something? If you've ever been in a lawsuit, admitting something, it means you're saying that it's true. You're saying, this is truth about me. I am powerless over alcohol or my addictions. And that my life is unmanageable. Now, unmanageability looks different for different people, right? For some people, it can be very severe. People end up in prison, or, they kill people with car accidents. Your life is unmanageable. For other people, it might be something that from the outside looks relatively minor, like they miss work because they're hungover. Or they get divorced because their spouse can't stand them drinking. That's not a minor thing, but it's like people rationalize it. Oh, I'm okay, I'm doing fine, but your life has become unmanageable because of your addictions. So if you want to get better, if you want to recover and get sober, you have to take this first step. And in a way, we become like Abraham. We have to take a step away from where we are. And that can be very difficult. We're all very comfortable where we are. And one thing that's very interesting about this biblical verse is that the instruction that God gives Abraham seems to be backwards. If you look at it, God says, leave your country, your city, and your father's house. Well, it really should be the other way. First, you leave your house, then you leave your city, then you leave your country. But there's a concept in Bible study that you might have heard, which is that there's nothing accidental in the way the Bible is written. This is the Word of God, if you believe that. And God doesn't just, randomly write things for no reason. There's a specific, God is telling Abram, I keep getting it mixed up myself, I'm sorry, that leaving where you grew up, leaving your old life behind is not easy. So, and the hardest thing is to leave the home where you grew up. So think about it like this. First, you're going to leave the country where you grew up. That has the least influence over you. Then you're going to leave the city where you grew up. That has slightly more influence over you. And then you're going to leave your father's house, which has the most influence over you. And there's a very useful idea there for recovery, which is that you can't do everything all at once. Taking the first step can be a process. You have to get yourself into it. It could take a while. First, you have to detach yourself from the broader environment that you're in. And then over time, you get ready to leave the home that you're in, meaning the home that you've created for yourself as an addict. You can then step away from that. And so some recovery thoughts are for us, from this Bible verse is, Abraham's life changed when he decided to take a step. And I want to make a comment here. One thing that's very interesting, the Bible also says later in this chapter, Abraham was 75 years old when he did this. He was already a mature man. Now, he was going to live quite a lot longer, but he was not a kid. But God recognized that this was not an easy step for him to take. Even as a mature man, it would take work for him. And what's interesting also, according to the commentary, is that God didn't tell Abram where he was going. He didn't show him a map and say, okay, you're going to walk for 800 miles and you're going to end up, not like, GPS on Google Maps, like here, you're going here and there's like a red line. Abram took the first step. He didn't know where he was going. He took the first step. He literally, according to the commentary, he took that step. He goes, am I there yet? God said, no, take another step. Took another step, said, am I there yet? No, take another step. So it went on like this, day after day, took a step. Is this it? Is this the land you want to show me? No. God says, I will tell you when you get there. But there's something very profound about that for addiction recovery. When you take that first step, and I think if you've been through this, you'll know what I'm saying, you really get lost. Where am I going? Can I live without alcohol and drugs? Is this even possible? Where am I going? Am I there yet? Have I reached this magical place called sobriety? No. God will tell you when it's, you will start to understand, probably by hearing God in your own way, that you have begun to reach a different place in your life. But it starts by taking a single step, the first step. And this verse brings that to life. And you can ask yourself, will your life change if you decide to take a step? That's something this verse can tell us. And Abram didn't know where he was going. This is something, this anticipates the second and third steps. You're taking a step towards sobriety. You don't know where you're going. God does. You're going to have to make a decision to turn your life over to the will of God, which comes in the second step. But in this way, the steps are all connected, and the Bible can be helpful in showing us how these steps are connected and how to make progress in the steps. So those are some thoughts on first step and Genesis. And if you'll indulge me in a shameless plug, some of these ideas are contained in my workbook, the Old Testament 12-Step Workbook, which is available at oldtestamentsobriety.com and in the link below. Thank you for listening to me today. I hope this was helpful for you. Hope you can stay with us and enjoy more Old Testament-based recovery videos.